So Sin City Cards asks a good question. What's the play on comic books version variants? Now variants. Do you want to have this conversation? We should have this conversation. Right? Variants, you really got to watch out for. You know, if you have a comic, and you know now they have variants by how many of a particular comic did the comic book store order. So if you order so many, then you get different variations, like 1 out of 25, 1 out of 50, like that, right? But unlike cards, there are some comics that do this, but unlike cards, comics don't tell you how many are in population.
Mm.
So if I'm looking at a Ja Morant National Treasures, I know 99 are in population, RPF, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the comic book, you don't know that. You just know that it's less than the main cover that's out there. And
Yeah.
so people are diving into comics for the variants, but some of the variants could be highly produced and easily found. So it's just something you got to watch out for because, you know, now if you got something signed by Stan Lee,
That's different.
yeah, it's different. It's totally different. You know, he only signed so much. People want a Stan Lee signed comic. You know, comics originally was signed just like a book inside the cover on the first page, probably at the bottom, maybe the top, most likely at the bottom. But because of collections and then grading comics, the autograph went to the cover. You can get it graded. The autograph is visible. Some older, like Jack Kirby signed some stuff, was inside the cover, and you'll never see the autograph if you got it graded. But in the notes up top, it'll tell you that it's signed by Jack Kirby. Still,
Wow.
still very valuable. Still well sought after in the comic book collecting community, but it's just different. So as you learn those nuances of time, things change, you know. But I think comic books are something that does not go away. Uh,
Mm-mm.
I think it's here. There's a story. It ties to characters. It's the original
It's a
form.
blueprint. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
blueprint.
it was saying the same thing. Yeah, I just added comics in my portfolio. What do you think? What do you two think is the play other than first appearances? Oh, you got first appearances. You got certain storylines. So that's a different thing about comics, right? Comics were made for people who are reading comics and getting into the storylines and what's happening in the comic. That's very important. So, did a team come together that may be influential in the future of comic history? Um, did someone leave a team? Did a major character die? Those are things that you get into when you start talking about comic books. So when you find stuff like that, then that's what you want to go after.
That
But
makes sense.
I think research. This is no different than we're talking about cards. The
Yeah,
thing about comics to me, there's a real barrier of entry. That is the word research. Now, in cards, you know, people can say, "Yeah, I'm researching," but there's only so much you really have to know, right?
mm-hmm.
If it's Ja Morant in today's market, there's a higher price tag probably. If it's numbered, if it's autographed, if it's on card, is it a sticker? Those are the kind of things you need to know. But in comics, everything we're talking about, like you kind of got to know what the storyline is. Are you going to take your time to read something? Are you going to take the time to really look something up and find? It's almost like trying to. JD, if you wrote a 20-page paper,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm quickly trying to understand what that paper was about, it's difficult. I got to take the time to read the paper.
Yeah.
That's what comic books are. And this is why, you know, we'll get into some stuff here, but I think
But
more people go to Marvel cards than go to comics because it's less of a barrier of entry.
it's easier to consume.
Yeah, it's
I,
easy to make the transition too. If I'm buying and selling cards, they have the same shape, they take up the same amount of space on my table. If I'm at a show, I include them and now I'm diversifying what I'm selling.
mm,
But if someone comes up and asks you about Spawn 1 and what happened in that and what led to Spawn 1, then we gotta
that's
we gotta know.
crazy. The comics is there. It gives you the origin, but the cards just get straight to the point because most of the time, it's a picture of what they did that summarizes the whole story of the comics.
But that, now what you're saying, that brings about almost like two different collectors.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have that. Then there's a bridge, and that bridge, I think we're still trying to understand: is it under construction or what is it? Right?
That's gonna.
Because a comic book reader, if you talk to somebody that's really into comic books, they're not looking at a
Yeah.
Marvel card, man.
Yeah, because they could look at the page. There's probably a certain page or a quote in that the comic, or they just probably touch them in a way that a card won't. You know what I mean? Probably Peter will probably Peter Parker probably said like I can't think of a line. When Uncle Ben died, you know,
Yeah.
with great power because we, you know, like that line probably they could look at that page like, oh yeah, that brings sentimental value rather than Spider-Man just like shooting his web slinger at something.
Mm-hmm. There's a difference. I didn't create it. Everybody that's out there that's like, is there a difference? Y'all know there's a difference. If you walk into a comic book store, go into your local comic book store and pull out some Marvel cards. And just talk to the owner of the comic book store and see if you find any Marvel cards in there for sale.
You're not. It'll be rare.
You're not gonna see it. It just doesn't happen. There's a division in the comic book world between graded and not graded. So we're talking not on, then on top of that, you're talking about Marvel cards. It's a different world.